Welcome back. I'm Gary Parr, and you are listening to Fiber Talk, the twice weekly podcast for needlework artists. And we've got a different one this week. We have an Haute Couture historian and an embroiderer, and they've come together and they've written a book that is probably the most unique textile art book I think that we've seen so far. So this is going to be a lot of fun. So we have Robert Ossant and Jessica Jane Pyle. Robert is a historian. Jessica's the embroiderer. So I've been looking forward to this one all day long. I've already learned things just talking ahead of time. So Robert, historian. I mean, to be an Haute Couture historian, you don't just start out doing that. How do you get to that?
Well, you start off as a writer, usually. In my case, I started off as a writer. I worked with Jess, actually, as the communications manager, writing newsletters, writing for the website for a historic embroidery house. And we were there we were there for about 10 years. And I just loved the embroidery. I loved the atelier. I loved watching people create. And that was mostly in a fashion context, but it also kind of crossed into art. And I decided to go off and do an art history degree. And that history of art gives you the tools and the language and the way of thinking about the history of fashion as well. And because I was working in fashion, it became a natural next step to write about fashion and write about haute couture. Bear in mind, these are all steps. Like, I don't think many people do a lot of business writing about haute couture because it's a small part. You know, if you write about haute couture, you also write about fashion.
Yeah.
And you probably, if you have to, you'll probably even just write about textiles and arts. You'll write about everything because you have to.
So, okay, so you're the answer to what does anyone do with an art history degree then?
Yes, you should go and write. If you can't write, though, that's the thing. I think a lot of people have to go into curating or working on the business side of things. But I was lucky. I kind of had a talent for writing in the first place.
Oh, okay. Now, see, I'm a retired magazine editor, trade magazines, industrial trade magazines. So I'm the other end of you in terms of the writing process. Obviously you enjoy the writing. You've done that quite a long time. I mean, your resume shows that you write all the time.
I think if I need to express my thoughts, it's better if I start writing things down. So it's something that I think when I was much younger, I had no idea that anyone would bother to pay you to write. But it kind of took a while to realize that it is something some people can't do and some people really can do. And you know, I kind of put it as a skill a little bit like embroidery. You know, it's a talent that people just hopefully should have. You can't force it.
Right. Well, I can assure you people can't write. I absolutely can assure you on that. There's a lot of editors.
I would definitely put myself in the I can sort of write, but not as good as Robert.
Yeah.
Very, very kind.
Yeah. And that doesn't happen overnight. I mean, that had to be a constant fight to get your stuff published, to get people to use your material, to get people to hire you. Quite a battle through the years just to get to the point where you're at now.
I would say it still is.
Okay.
You are. It's a competitive space. It's not always very well paid, but I think part of you does it for the passion and the love of it, and you do it because you know good things will come along. And in my case, you know, that was this book. That has been some of the fantastic articles that I've written. You know, you just have to. It's like when you imagine the life of an actor. They get a little bit part in a small film, but most of the rest of the time they're working in a coffee shop.
Right.
You know, the hope is you have that big break, and
right.
I guess that kind of happened for us.
Yeah. Did you know? Was there a point where you knew you were gonna that your writing was going to focus on higher end fashion, and that you were going to be able to make a living, or did it just evolve as you went through the days?
It definitely evolved. I mean, just a couple of years ago, I was writing about NFT art for a Netflix documentary. You know, that is as far removed from fashion as you can get.
Yeah,
but that was what was really, yeah. NFTs bizarrely did end up sort of intersecting with fashion, but at that time it was pure weird technology. But that's what you have to do that's the job you have to do that day.
Right.
But then the next day you're writing about a fantastic new artificial leather that's been generated, or you're writing about this amazing couture gown that's just been presented. And the idea is that it starts to shift more and more towards the stuff that you're actually passionate about. And you have to write weird little press releases for toilet manufacturers a little less often.
Yeah, yeah, those, yeah. What is it? There's some actor who,
Danny Flow.
yeah, who I do these movies so I can do the ones I want to do. Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
You do the ones that sell tickets so you can do the more sophisticated ones. Yep, that's the game you play. So you went the usual route of I've written a piece and I got to get it placed somewhere. And you start getting people to say, well, that was a good piece. Will you do this for us? And so you went pretty much the same route then.
Yeah,
All
and,
do.
and people just hearing and asking, and obviously you have to do a lot of your own promotion, a lot of your own
Right.
getting it out there and reach. But yes, it's something that's grown organically over time, and I'm quite pleased with how it's all going. One thing I would add though is I always advocate that you've got to be passionate about what you do, and I think you can only see a bit of it, but I am surrounded by books right now. I'm always looking, I'm always reading. If I have a commission from a client to write about something and we have to go deeply theoretical, I don't have to go to the library. I have the books somewhere here, and I can usually put them on my desk, do all the research without even having to, order any new books, and present, a finished analysis or article or whatever it is that they need. And so I think if you're passionate about it, it's not that hard. It becomes easier.
Yeah. No, I've already studied behind you. One of the things that happens to you as an editor is you read everything and then want to correct it, fix it, shorten it, tighten it, whatever. So yeah, every word that comes across my eyes, at some point, even reading novels is difficult because I start editing the copy, and and my wife, she worked with me for years on the magazine, and she has the same disease. And she says, "Man, this is so poorly written." She says, "I can't read it anymore. I keep editing it." Yeah.
But you can keep learning and evolving. And I learned working with Jess because I was too brief. I would be sending an email to someone, and we might have a conversation. She'd go, "Robert, you could always ask how they are. You could always just a little bit of small talk in there won't kill you." Do you remember? And Jess was like, and I used to joke, like, is this enough? And it would be like, "How doth be you? Are you having a great day?" I was like, "Is this flowery enough for you?"
Sometimes it came across as sarcastic, so we used to sit there and be like, "Right, you need to be a bit more serious here and ask it in a better way."
It's
and
true.
I'd approve it and be like, "You can send that now."
Yeah, you can't be too curt and too short and too brief. A little bit of floweriness around the edges is always good.
Take 3 seconds and be a human. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah. What is it about haute couture that makes you lock in on that? Is it the art?
Oh, yes. I think because I studied art history, you really learn to analyze the visual. You are supposed to study the biography of the maker, the painter, the sculptor. You're supposed to look at the period in history, the patrons, the people who are sponsoring this, the people who are buying it, and try and get this picture that tells you something about history and art and culture and life maybe at that time. I think a good example is looking at like Basquiat in the 1980s in New York. You can look at the paintings and they really sum up the whole that moment in time in New York, and the graffiti and the energy and the vibrancy. It's the same with fashion. We don't necessarily see it in the moment, but if you start looking back, particularly we talk about this in the book, particularly Christian Dior, after the Second World War. France was recovering from a devastating war. It was a state, its couture was on its knees, and along comes this designer with a vision, and he's creating these huge, voluminous dresses covered in beautiful embroidery, making women super feminine again, and everyone loved it because it was a moment where everything came together: the visual, the history, the biography of the maker. And I think haute couture, maybe more than art, it speaks to people because it's people that have to wear it. You don't just stick it on a wall and walk out the room, you live in it. So when you're talking about fashion and haute couture in terms of history, it has more resonance because it's real, it's lived.
Yeah. I would also add to that is that it's about the one-off nature of those pieces as well, and the amount of craftsmanship that go. I'm talking from obviously the craft side of it.
Right.
Um, the level of work that goes into those individual pieces, and the huge cost and time, and the sort of essentially dying trades that are still supported by these huge brands, that you can kind of see all of those things in one garment. You know, the like painted feathers and the intricate embroidery, those things that you just don't really exist outside of haute couture anymore, still get their space walking down the catwalk every year, and they're one-off pieces, and they should be celebrated in the same way that Robert's spoken about them, and all the design motifs and history behind it. They've got that incredible amount of craftsmanship as well.
Yeah. And I'm going to bring up that movie that I'm sure you guys just don't care for. I don't know how you feel about it, but The Devil Wears Prada. Because I've probably seen it 3 times just because Meryl Streep is so brilliant in it. But that scene where she describes the impact of high-end fashion as it trickles down to what people can afford to wear has always stuck with me, because you see these out of the world garments that people create, and you think, how is that even anything? How does that have meaning? And then that pops into my head. Is those things set trends that then show up down the ladder? Yeah.
And also innovation. These garments have huge amounts of funding that goes into them from the brands, and the all the different aspects of it being created. Like they can look into different technologies and new fabrics and new embroideries, and like experiment with lighting or painting or whatever, and it's pushing the boundaries of innovation in these historic crafts that still exist. So yeah, as you say, like, and those things filter down into the lower fashions collections, in not such a big way, but
Right.
yeah, then we
Right.
get the
I
benefits.
would almost compare it to NASA. The technology that NASA created to put people in space and people on the moon is in our iPhone now.
Yeah.
And at the time, the money that was spent creating these microchips and these technologies and all of these different things, is now an everyday part of thing. You can look at Izzy Miyake as a fashion designer, the innovations in terms of material that he came up with. You can find everywhere now. That's essentially lycra. Where did lycra come from? That was invented. These kind of things that are so commonplace now were probably once just someone's dream fabric that they came up with for an haute couture show.
Yeah.
I'm not sure lycra came from haute couture, so please, verify that before you put it in a book.
Yeah, I don't think it did, but we'll ride with the
Yeah.
and then one more for you, and then we're going to learn about embroidery. These days, do you find that keeping up with all of the designers and all of the design houses is more difficult because we have so many individuals jumping into the game? Do you find yourself working harder to stay on the front edge of what's happening, or is it easier?
Oh, this is quite hard because the fashion industry is multi-layered. It's a big pyramid. Haute couture effectively is at the top, and there's only so many people that are designing at that level.
Okay.
That number doesn't hugely increase. We're talking the people who are making the Bentleys and the Rolls Royces of fashion.
Mm-hmm.
They're at the top. Below them, there's probably the normal design houses that make ready-to-wear clothing that they have huge budgets. They put on massive shows a couple of times a year. We're talking Louis Vuitton, Versace, for example. You know, these are big houses. That number of houses is growing. You could say in the last 20 years, we've had the likes of McQueen, Jacquemus, Caperni, Tom Ford, for example. You know, so that strata does grow.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's a problem. It's a manageable number still. I think where it becomes a problem, and I guess I'm kind of twisting your question towards sustainability. It is the fast fashion. It's the lowest level. It's the cheap, crappy clothes that we are ordering online, that we're getting delivered, that we're wearing 3 times, and then they don't quite fit properly, and we're throwing them away.
Right.
That's ridiculous. And I don't think a single word should be written about any of that. I think there should almost be. In France, actually has just introduced a law to say that, if you're an influencer promoting fast fashion, we will fine you, because it's simply not sustainable. It's not good for the planet. And of course, France has vested interests. It has a couture industry that it wants to protect.
Yeah.
And protecting it from, the bottom up is a good way to safeguard it. But I think in reality, if I'm writing and trying to keep track of all the amazing things that are going on in fashion, bear in mind I want to focus on embroidery. So if Tom Ford, who's now the head designer, is a man called Hader Ackerman, they're not really likely to be leaning a lot into embroidery. I can just go, not writing about that one. But if Christian Dior new collection is absolutely dripping in embroidery, I'll write about that. So in that regard, I can keep up, as long as I ignore all the noise at the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, I intentionally left fast fashion out. We've had in a couple of recent shows, we've actually talked about it a bit because of an article I read or a video. I forget what it was. Because I feared with you two I'd set off a firestorm of of whatever, because it really is a serious problem, and
it really is.
Yeah, I never appreciated it, and it was a story, a video I watched about the district somewhere in China where they're just cranking out this garbage, and basically sending it to the States, and kids are just lapping it up, and it's just, oh. Yeah.
No. There's, I think, Shein, which is the biggest one at the moment. I think it's making something like 15,000 garments a year. It's lines it's producing, not individual garments, like lines, like Asher. Is it more than that, Jess?
I mean, 15,000 garments wouldn't be that much.
Sorry, no, 15,000
lines, would probably be a long
time. So this shirt 15,000 times, your shirt 15,000 times, and one of the problems that they have is that they can't sell it that fast enough. People can't buy it that fast enough. They deliberately junk it. They'll just burn it if it doesn't sell. So the garment isn't part of the profit anymore. It's the idea of buying something is where the profit is.
I would say that also, like, it's not just Shein that is responsible for that. There are fashion brands that are doing the same thing, like Highend Fashion, like Burberry. They go and burn their lost stock, and they just get rid of it and burn it. So it's not everyone to blame. It's not just fast fashion. I think we have a level of responsibility in the industry to make sure that we're responsible with our sourcing. But yeah, fast fashion is a problem, but that is also not just of the smaller, more cheaper brands.
On that though, I think it's worth mentioning Kevin Germanier again. He is a haute couture designer. He's only been on the cycle for a few years now, so he's not massive. I don't think he's even created a ready-to-wear line yet. But his haute couture pieces are made out of recycled textiles. So he's creating the highest level of fashion with existing upcycled materials. And it goes to show it can be done. And the idea, we talk about that trickle down, you talk about Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada. The hope, I think, for people in the fashion industry who actually care about the planet is like design houses will look at Gemanier and go, if he can do it, we can do it. And maybe we'll all be able to wear clothes that have been recycled from old clothes instead of everything made new from scratch, which is so carbon intensive.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things out there. For instance, like Kering, which owns a lot of the big fashion brands, they have their own sustainability program, which they run throughout all of their suppliers across the world. So India, China, Portugal, wherever they're getting um, their embroidery or garments or whatever, they have like levels of compliance that these factories need to adhere to. So where they're sourcing their materials, the work conditions for the workers, all sorts of things that mean that lots of brands, high-end brands, are working together to produce more sustainable like garments in the ready-to-wear industry, and that also then filters down lower down. So there is lots of things out there that are going on. I could talk about it for ages, but I've written a lot about it. Uh, but yeah, there's lots out there that says that brands are working together to make sure that we're protecting the future industries.
Okay, that's so interesting to hear because the last, like I said, I'm a magazine editor, and the last magazine that I edited before I retired, that was sustainability was becoming a major topic for us each year in manufacturing in general, and because I mean, for us it was more heavier industry, but these manufacturers were seriously paying attention to sustainability, and
Yeah,
so there is a movement then in fashion which you don't normally pick up on just watching the daily news. So there is
yeah,
a movement to make that whole, because usually what you hear is it's so wasteful and it's so bad for the environment and all those things, but
yeah.
serious houses then are working at it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. There's lots going on.
Yeah, that's
I
encouraging.
think the
That's
last thing I would say on it, though, about embroidery at the level of embroidery at Haute Couture, like the pieces that we talk about in the book, um, I would hope that they're judged to a different standard because they are expressions of art. They are,
right.
you know, and I would hope that they're not going to end up, clogging a canal in, you
Right.
know, some third world country because someone's thrown them away. I think these is a different level entirely, but it's still very encouraging to see that some of the designers are thinking in terms of sustainability.
Right. Well, in the whole needle arts world, I mean, I think there's a different level of judgment that gets applied because it really is an art thing rather than a crank it out at 1,000 an hour type thing. That's it's a different approach all the way around. So Jess, where do you get into this? Is it were you embroidery from the get go, or how did you get involved in this world?
So I trained at Central School of Speech and Drama, which is a theatre school, and my course was in theatrical costume making. So I was creating the costumes for the theatre. And I graduated and worked in the theatre for a bit, and then found an interest in embroidery. I worked on a few projects where I needed to do some embroidery on the garments. So I ended up going to the company that me and Robert met at, and interning there, and learning a lot about embroidery. And then after a bit of an intern, 3 month stint, they offered me a job. And then I was there as I started as a designer, and learned embroidery while designing, and then moved my way up the company. I was there for 12 years and ended up leaving at the end of the not last year, the year before, as the managing director. So I was there, yeah, for 12 years.
So
Um,
that's hand and lock, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, that's where me and Robert met. And yeah, I managed the team there, and oversaw all the production of like our really large scale projects. Worked with all of the large fashion brands and kind of just like did quite a lot. And then since then, I've left and I've started up my own embroidery business,
Yep.
and also my own interior design business, which focuses on bringing embroidery into the interiors. But I still do a lot of fashion embroidery with the embroidery side.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I wrote my first book called Fashion Embroidery in 2018, I think it came out, and that was kind of like a bit of a less deep dive into couture embroidery, but still looked at like the broader techniques that we used in haute couture.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's kind of up to date, I guess.
Yeah, and what you have that, then you have the interior design with your sister, and
Yes, yeah,
and you sleep between midnight and 3 in the morning, right?
yeah.
It's about what all you can do. Yeah.
This is what Robert always says to me. How do you have this much time in the day?
And also, could you please let someone else have a job?
There's
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's all
No,
right. Yeah, but that's so fun to be able to do a business with your sister. That's got to be a completely different experience, and interior design just in itself is a different world.
yeah. Yeah, well she trained in architecture, so she's
Oh,
got the like design, like interior side, whereas I'm like, I'll just come and make everything look pretty with embroidery all over it.
oh,
Perfect pairing.
that's a perfect pairing, though. Actually,
Exactly,
yeah.
yeah. That's what you
Well,
think.
well played, well played. Yeah. All right, so you two meet at Hand and Lock, and then
Yeah.
where does the idea for this book come into play? Just noodling ideas around, or
I guess I can answer that.
Hmm.
I think after writing my first book, um, I kind of like wrote it, and then afterwards was like, oh, I really feel like I could go into more depth here.
Mhm.
Like, obviously, the first book is just like a very broad view on techniques, but I felt like there's not really that much out there that allows you as a reader to fully understand the process from being a concept of a design through to the practical like execution of the embroidery.
Yeah,
So like really looking at like how that designer came up with that idea, and then where that idea led to, and then the practical elements of like designing it, looking at the materials, looking at like how the composition would work on the body, and then actually executing it. And I thought, including my own book, I didn't think there were many books out there that did that.
hmm,
So I think that was my initial idea. And obviously, working with Robert for such a long time and, admiring his like area that he works in, his historian and like
right,
looking into designers and stuff. I wanted to bring him on board to do that section, to look at the designers, look at their codes, look at their the ideas behind it, and then I would do the practical side of it. So it kind of came together really well, and I think we pulled it
no,
off, didn't we?
it
I think we played to our strengths, and
yeah,
Yeah.
I think they were extremely complementary. Like I I'm not that interested sometimes in the finest technical details. Like I like the embroidery. Someone will tell me how it's done. I'll go, that's cool. But that's where my interest kind of ends. I'm kind of at the other end where I'm going like, this designer grew up in an orphanage and she was surrounded by camellias, and
yeah,
then later in her life she put camellias in her clothes, and it talks about her, her childhood. So literally in the case of Chanel, that is, the camellias came from the orphanage she grew up in. And Jess talks about how these camellias can be integrated in embroidery and created in the garment. And so we
right,
literally just
Exactly.
met at the middle.
yeah,
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 because then I on the flip side of that, it's like I find what talks about interesting,
mm,
but I wouldn't go out and find that information for myself. I'm more like, wow, look at that embroidery. Like, how did they do that? Like, what are the materials that you use? What did they think about to try and attach that bead there? Like, how did they think about the drape or the weight, or like, how is that constructed? Like, all of those things are things that I find interesting.
Right.
So yeah, as Robert said, meeting in the middle was like a perfect synergy
Right.
for two people.
Well,
And
and I have to say, when Robert wrote to me to suggest doing the show, I find the haute couture world fascinating, and it would, I thought, well, this would be a show that would be very different from what we normally do. So let's go for it and see how it comes out. And I've been surprised before, so let's go along for the ride. Then when I got the book and I opened the thing up, and the first thing is the materials you need to stitch.
yeah,
And I paused. I remember pausing to think, wait a minute, I thought I was going to get a book about all these fashion houses and history. And no. And then as I go through the book, and it's the history, and then it's here's how you can here's how you can use the techniques. And oh man, you had me. I mean, you absolutely locked me in to the whole book, because and then on top of it, one of the techniques that I'm really itching to try is tambour beading and embroidery, because I've not tried that, and it fascinates me.
yeah,
So when this book and these two components that normally wouldn't fit together, and you guys made them work, I really enjoyed the book. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Thank
yeah,
you.
Yeah. Yep.
yeah.
So
I think also, just sort of to add on that, is like previous like books that, as I said, that I've read, don't actually, they might teach you a technique, but and apply it to a like a frame design, so a
right.
design you can do in a frame, but not actually say, okay, you've got this garment here, you can take this embroidery and you can do that yourself. And
Hmm.
then you can look at any other garment you want to, and you can identify the embroidery and understand it and know how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. You guys just hit it. It was just great. It was just great. So Robert, when you said, all right, what designers are we going to talk about? Was that a difficult list to pare down to what would fit in the book, or pretty straightforward for you?
No, there was definitely a lot of going backwards and forwards, a lot of discussions between us. I think we both had like non-negotiables, people that had to be in there that we
Yeah.
wanted. I think we were trying to take a lot of, there are a lot of criteria that the designers have to fulfill. Obviously, they have to use embroidery. Then
Right.
there also has to be enough contrast between the different pieces. And I think Jess can talk more on this, because writing the chapter, I think we had to eliminate someone because it was the same technique as someone else, and there was just
Oh.
no point having two deep dive chapters with instructions
Yeah.
and so much information when we're effectively just repeating a technique we've already done. I mean, there's I think 40 plus designers in the book, and is it 8 where we go really deep and we go into the embroidery, and I go into the biography and the history. The aim is to link all of that up so you can see how their life has impacted their embroidery design decisions. And I think part of choosing those 8, that was hard. I mean, there was someone that got cut, and that was kind of painful because it was a big, fully written section, but it just, I think there's an expression in writing, and you'll probably be familiar with it. It's kill your darlings.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
You've created this absolutely beautiful thing that you're so proud of, but ultimately at the end, you have to take scissors
Yep.
to it.
That's
And
right.
that's what we did.
Yeah.
But there were other things that we wanted to think about. There's a huge imbalance in the fashion industry, particularly in representation, where it's men, men, men. There are so many women designers out there that are spectacular and get overlooked. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't contribute to that. We wanted to make sure we were focusing on the great female designers that should be included in the book, and they are.
Yeah, and I did notice that there's an excellent mix in there. That came through. Yeah. So
I can tell you what that stemmed from. Sorry, it's just something that really got my goat. I was at an art gallery, I think in the States. I think it was the Los Angeles Art Museum, and bought a deck of cards. And I was very excited. I love getting decks of cards with unusual things in them. And this was a deck of cards of the world's most famous artists. 52 cards. Spread them out on my table when I got home. 50 of them were men, 2 of them were women. I was
Oh.
like, that's ridiculous.
Yep.
I don't want to contribute to that kind
Yeah.
of ridiculousness.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So of the ones that you decided to expand on, Jess, what was it? Was it obviously you tried to get a different technique each time, but what was the process of deciding the embroidery design you were going to pull from? Are those dresses from the designer, or are they something that you put together that replicate the designer's work?
So all of the embroidery practical sides of them are taken from designs from a specific garment from a
Okay.
designer. And I wanted to get, yeah, as Robert said, a broad range of techniques so that everything that you learn was different and had a different like take on design or technique, and also looked at innovation. So there's one section where you learn how to make sequins, which isn't actually really embroidery. Only the very last bit of it is embroidery of attaching that
Yeah.
sequin
Yeah.
onto the garment, but it's about the process of being an embroiderer and working with new materials and innovating, like, or taking a designer's concept and working out how to make that a reality.
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, I tried to pick things that would inspire people to go off and do their own projects, and also so that they would learn something different in each chapter. But some of them also do correlate to each other. Like there's Ari in one section which is very similar to Tambur, and I talk a lot about the fashion industry and sourcing their embroidery from places like India, and how a lot of the couture pieces might have been done in India, so they're not necessarily going to be tambered, and the differences between them. So you'll see similarities in the techniques, but they teach a different thing.
Yeah. I had not heard of that technique at all,
Yeah.
and one of the areas in the world that I really would like to get a guest from, an artist, a needleworker, is from India. Um,
Ah,
and I've just not found anybody, and often the language gets in the way.
yeah.
The language barrier, which is kind of an issue. There and Russia are my two.
No,
Man, I just
not
can't.
happening yet.
I can't get past the language barrier. But Ari, the one that really surprised me was the canvas work dress. I did not expect
Yeah.
that at all in fashion.
Yeah. Well, it's few and far
I'm
between.
sure of
Um,
that.
because obviously canvas work is like inherently more interiors and more like, I mean, you do get it in fashion, but you mostly see it on like bags or shoes.
Right.
um, so when we found that piece, we were like, right, we're going to do that one because that shows something different. And it just shows that in whatever technique you choose, you can apply it to fashion if you want to.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that, I mean, it
The,
works. It just surprised me. Because that's such a
Mm,
stiff material.
The
yeah.
interesting thing about that, though, that's the chapter on Alexander McQueen, but he was trying to make a statement about the arts and crafts movement and the
Yeah.
hierarchy of creative crafts, and basically saying, why do we consider handicrafts as less than high art? And
Hmm.
so by putting this low art of canvas work, this simple needle and stitch technique, on the world's platform, on one of the biggest catwalks in the world, he's basically saying, look at this lowly craft and how beautiful it can be, and we call this women's work. So he,
Right.
he was, like good art, he was saying something.
Yeah. You just said the phrase that irks me to no end: women's work.
Hmm.
Because that, and we've had so many discussions through the years about this concept that needlework, textile arts, is woman's work and does
Mm,
not sit on the same level with sculpture and painting and pen and ink drawing and all of those things. And it just is so irritating because it is an art form, and people who can manipulate needle and thread and create from that need to be held up along with the rest of them. It frustrates me to no end, and yeah. Yeah.
We talk about it the same all the time. I think here in France, it is a respected skill, and it is a very respectable job. But I think it's sad that in other parts of the world, it is just deemed a hobby and
Yes.
therefore dismissed. And it's not. It's a real job. It's a real skill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's yeah. Just nails
we,
on a
we can all
chalkboard.
go on
Yeah.
a protest.
We when we worked at Hand and Lock and people used to come in and they would be like, "Oh my God, you're all so young." Like, I just thought it would be like a room of
Oh.
just old women.
Uh,
And you'd be like, "No, actually, people do find this interesting and you can actually do it as a career."
yeah. Because I forget who we did a show with from Hand and Lock, but yeah, young people. Why not?
Yeah.
It's an art form. People enjoy it, and it has so many benefits beyond mental health and all the things that it
Mm.
provides for people, and yet the end result is beautiful and it's creative, and why not? Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
frustrating. Yeah. Tell me about. I had until I ran into this book had the perception that tambour, embroidery, beadwork, whatever, was the 90% of what was done in high-end fashion was tambour technique because it's fast. And this book has changed my perception of that. Am I wrong? Am I right? Where is it?
I mean, I would say the majority of embroidery in haute couture is tambour beaded because, yes, one, it is fast. Um, but there are lots of pieces of embroidery that can't be tampered
Right.
because they need to be individually stitched on, and you can't do that with tamper. I mean, there are ways of doing it, but I think that in the book, I wanted to open the doors to other techniques that aren't used that regularly in haute couture, and say it's not just tambour beading, it can be something else. But yeah, you are right, most of the embroidery is done by tambour.
Yeah. Okay.
But I would add to that that while it is fast when it's in the hands of someone incredibly skilled, and I have seen very, very skilled tambour beaders, like almost working at a machine-like speed.
Yes.
Um, if you look at some of the actual haute couture dresses, it doesn't matter how fast you are when you're embroidering an entire bodice, an entire
Mm,
skirt, huge structural hood, a train that goes 2 meters behind the person.
yeah.
You can be as fast as you like. That is so much beading that it will still take a team of 4 people 4,000 hours to complete it.
Uh-huh.
That's the
It's
kind of level.
also it's
Yeah.
limiting because it has to be a continuous line.
Right.
So as I said, if you're stitching on like a really large sequin here and there, they have to be stitched separately. Otherwise, you have a line of stitching from one to the other. So I think, yeah, if you look at lots of pieces, unless there's continuous lines of stitching, other than that, it's not going to be tampered.
Yeah. Well, that Adam and Eve dress in the book, holy smokes! Whoa.
That's
Whoa.
one of my favorites.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean,
And that I think rings to both of us because it is a historic artwork, a Renaissance
Mm,
artwork that's been recreated in
yeah.
fashion, and it looks stunning. I think it really spoke to both of us.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was one where I would move a small mountain to see that live, because
Mm,
that's got to be
yeah.
really something to see.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Did the when it comes to doing extensive embroidery such as that on a dress, what, Jess, how does the I mean, at some point it can get heavy. It can start to change how the dress hangs.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
there's a better technical term than hang, but that's all I have. But these factors come into play when you're designing. They have to.
Yeah, well, so obviously when the like head designer designs something, it will be quite conceptual,
Hmm.
and it might get a bit more detailed as there's various iterations of that design coming through, and then it will be passed through different levels of designers to then end up with the embroiderers, and everyone is part of that conversation where you talk about what the base fabric was going to be, what the embroidery needs to be, how that embroidery is going to affect the base fabric, how the drape is going to change, what the weight is, how you're creating a seam. So if there's like a dress that's completely made of tulle and it's got very heavy crystals on it, okay, you can do that, but how are you then going to support those crystals? Does it need a lining? How are the seams going to be like sewn together? Does it need tape inside of it so that those seams don't rip with the weight of the beads on it? And all of those conversations will happen in the initial stages. Samples will be made to test these sort of things. And then once they're happy with it, then they can go ahead and create the actual embroidery. But yeah, you need to consider all of this: material selection, weight, fabric, durability, everything.
Okay, so it is like everything else. Then it's the full design process: design, test,
Yeah.
sample.
Yeah.
That never changes no matter what we're making. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it goes through so many different people with different specializations. I think, I mean, I remember when we were working together, sometimes people would come in and they'd have a vision for something and they'd be adamant, do it this way. I want these beads here on this dress. And, you know, Jess and the other designers might be pushing back saying that won't work. That will hang like this or it will do that. And they wouldn't listen because they thought they knew everything. And you know, you do have to listen to everyone's point of view because people know things.
Yeah.
Didn't we have someone who wanted some machine embroidery on leather once and it just scissor cut it all out and just turned it to ribbons? And she was warned, but she insisted.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's things like that. It's like, as an experienced person in the embroidery industry, I've seen a lot of projects and worked on them, and I know what will work and won't work. Doing machine embroidery on leather, heavy machine embroidery, and then stretching it, it's going to split because leather doesn't have a warp and a weft. So it's basically you're just putting holes into a piece of leather and then expecting that to then continue to hold. It's not going to.
No.
So yeah, I guess the process is pulling on everybody's knowledge. So the embroiderer will also be there with the seamstress who will understand how to create the seam, and then based on the embroidery and all of that. So yeah, it's pulling on people's knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I can imagine ego working with there's ego in all these kinds of
Yeah.
things, and yeah, I'm sure you get all kinds of experiences there, which we could probably do a whole show telling stories about that.
Yeah.
With you guys masked out so you can't get blamed for telling the story. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Censored, giving all the scandalous stories.
When it comes to embroidery and haute couture, is expense does cost still play a role, or is it pretty much go for it?
I think
It depends.
Oh,
I know the answer. It depends. Okay.
what would you say, Jess? Because we might come at this from different perspectives.
I think there's certain brands will be no expense spared, but obviously every brand has a limit. And they will work to that, and they'll have a budget for each piece. But yeah, they're big, obviously, because with the nature of haute couture, so much of it has to be handmade. So not only is it expensive materials, but it's expense of time. Those craftsmen coming in and spending the time creating it. So yeah, there is budgets, definitely, and they'll be smaller for smaller brands and bigger for bigger brands. Do you have a different opinion, Robert?
Well, I think it's interesting just the way the fashion industry works with haute couture. I think that they'll put on these most spectacular shows. I mean, think about the Chanel shows under Karl Lagerfeld, where you know there would be a giant handbag and all the models would walk around it, or he'd recreate a beach scene and they'd all walk down the sand. but they're inside the Grand Palais in Paris. So the sets were ridiculous. That's just the sets. Then there's the clothes, and every single one is, custom made, handmade to the highest possible levels. These are hugely expensive events, but yet the audience of women, and it is mainly women, who go to these big design houses and say, make me, I saw the show, I love dress number 37, make that for me, but I'd like it with sleeves because I don't like my upper arms. And, the house would custom make that garment. That is haute couture. That's the way it's done. And there'll only be a handful of those dresses made for these extremely rich clients. And they're talking, sometimes up to £100,000 for these dresses to be made, and they'll wait 3 months and it will be delivered to them. So this is a huge, huge, huge expense with a shrinking number of women buying it. It's not a profit exercise.
No.
Haute couture is an advertising exercise. When the big brands do this, they get all of that media attention. There's someone in a PR department somewhere adding up how many minutes of coverage they've had on the news, how many spreads they've had in newspapers, and all the while it's perpetuating that brand name. And where they recoup the money is perfumes and handbags. Because everyone knows the Chanel handbag and everyone wants the Chanel perfume. Why? Because we all saw the Chanel shows. So yeah.
So there's
Long
how it
answer.
plays out. Because I could never piece that together. How can these one-off dresses be profitable?
No, they're apps. It shouldn't be called haute couture. It should be called haute advertising.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're also often not sold. No. They're rented out, usually for free, to celebrities, again in an advertising marketing way, and also they might never be remade in the way that Robert said, and there wouldn't be a lady that comes in and wants it remade in a different way. They just go into their archive and sit there until they're put on at a exhibition in the V&A.
But you talked before about, again, Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada and this idea of trickling down. I think I was watching a haute couture show by a designer called Stéphane Rolland in Paris 2 days ago, and he had such a specific color palette of reds and like nudes and blacks, and there was something so striking about the red that he used. And I would not be surprised if a year from now that's available on a sweater, that you can get in Target or, in I'm trying to think of stores in America. I don't know stores in America. I'm going to go with Zara. Surely Zara's everywhere. But this such a specific shade of red, so striking that other designers are going to go, oh, I'm going to use that in my collection, and it will trickle its way down.
Yeah, well, it's you bring back a memory. I used to edit for many years an architectural magazine, and the Pantone color of the year. And I got to go on a trip to a place where interior designers were in, and I asked about what's the big deal of the color of the year, and I got a whole presentation about how important that is, and all of the industries that are affected by the color of the year, and I, for me it was just clothing, and but then they started listing all the other ones, automobiles and you name it, and that whole thing all out of a color. So when you mention that red, the impact it has out of a dress is it really kind of struck me quite hard, the impact that has, because we don't think about it.
No. It's got to start somewhere, hasn't it?
Right. Okay, we're going to run out of time. I knew that was going to happen. Talk to me about the fashion industry. With haute couture and the higher end things. Is it centered in France still? Are there other parts of the world that have are big players? And I never get the sense that the U.S. is part of that higher end world. Am I wrong?
Well, obviously, when you think about Fashion Week, there's Paris, there's New York, there's London, there's Milan. I mean, funnily enough, there's even like Gran Canaria Swim Week and
Oh,
Tokyo, and there's these other weeks, but there is probably a hierarchy, and it probably starts with Paris.
okay.
But I think American fashion in New York has had its moments, just as London has had its moments. I think maybe you'll disagree, Jess, but a bit of me thinks America does a very good job of creating brilliant designers who then go to France and lead French
Mm.
design houses. And I'm thinking particularly of Daniel Roseberry at Schiaparelli, um, and also Tom Ford when he was at Gucci. These are as American as you can get, and they were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So I think there might be something about the confidence, the American confidence, as well as that American vision that breathes fresh new life into these European design houses.
I also think that we in Europe have an industry already there that looks after a lot of the craft. So we have access to a lot of, embroidery schools, and going from London to Paris to learn about pleating isn't that difficult. Whereas across the pond, you don't have the access like we do to all of these like very old ancient techniques that don't necessarily exist over there.
Hmm.
So yeah, we have the access to it, and therefore our designs maybe are more intuitive to haute couture.
Hmm.
If that makes sense.
It's more embedded. It's like it's embedded in European DNA,
Yeah,
I think.
and
But
also sorry, lots of new designers are coming from places like India and China, because they also have access to the industries out there that create these intricate embroideries. Like India is very well known in the fashion industry for creating a lot of embroidery. And there's quite a few designers now, like Rahul Mishra, who are creating these insane pieces. And he's using the artisans in India, and they are being celebrated for the crazy embroidery that they can create out there. And in some cases, it is more amazing there than what they're making in France, because all of the smaller fashion brands that don't have huge amounts of money to have their pieces made in France go to India, and they're at the forefront of the innovation in embroidery because they are actually creating it.
Hmm.
yeah,
So yeah, places like that are becoming more larger in the fashion world, I guess.
Gary, maybe you could answer a question for us about what's the psychology in the States around embroidery? Like, do people feel it's something you do at home in front of the TV to relax, or it's a serious career where you can create, beautiful things and make a living from it?
Well, there is that element, but in my view, very small.
Mm.
It's still needle and thread, women's work, a hobby that you do in the evenings after the kids are in bed, that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I see it in Australia.
Yes, that's a
I
great.
see there is a vast community of needle artists who are doing art, and it's
Yeah.
respected as art. I see that a lot. I don't. I see it in pockets in Europe, but I don't see it widespread. The United States is behind the game on this. There's no question.
Yeah.
There's a huge
I think,
needlework industry and hobby, huge in the U.S., but to view it as art is I don't see that.
yeah. There definitely is in the UK and in
Yes.
France an industry for it to be respected as an art form. You've got obviously institutions like the Royal School of Needlework, and there's also like the King's Foundation, which like basically supports craftsmanship, and they have a whole embroidery program. Then there's also Quest, which was the Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Trust, which funds like dying trades. I say dying, we don't want it to be dying. Um, like
Life
embroidery.
portraits.
Yeah. And then also, like in Paris, you've got Lesage. That's an embroidery school as well, where people can go and learn how to be a professional embroiderer. So I think, yeah, it's definitely more respected than it was. And I think obviously Australia, they have a very large embroidery guild program in the whole
Yes.
of Australia. So that's why there's lots of people doing it out there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. But to me, in Australia, the perception is quite
Yeah.
different. It's quite
Yeah.
different, and as a result of that, the art that comes out of
More
there is some of it just really spectacular. Yeah.
mm,
Yeah, we've talked to a couple about that. Yeah, and it's odd, when you look at needle and thread, needlework, needle art, and you think you think of well, England, but Europe in general, and the last place you would think would be Australia,
Australia.
and yet I feel like I really feel like there's a strength there, and see, and I say that, but I've not been able to get people, like I said, from India, and I got to believe
Mm.
that there's a world there that I've just simply not seen.
Yeah.
Well, you described it, doing some phenomenal embroidery, and I just haven't been able to tap into that. And there is in Eastern Europe and Russia,
Mhm.
there is a
Mm,
whole different level and perspective of needlework in general that I've not been able to tap into, primarily because of language barriers. But
mm,
some of the work I see out of there is really
mm.
terrific, and that there's some history there too that
Well,
carries
in
through.
India, um, the embroiderers are mainly men.
Mm,
Um, so it's a very different culture out there. Um, and they are, I guess they're not very well paid.
yeah.
Um, which is when I was talking about like caring and the sustainability, a lot of their sustainability program is focused in India about creating better work environments for the men who are the embroiderers, and women are the ones who run the factories, who actually put the pieces into production. So they're more well respected in the industry.
uh,
So it's a total flip. But yeah, it's difficult because obviously the men who are doing the actual embroidery aren't, they don't speak English because they're coming from rural towns in India.
yeah.
And they have been doing embroidery through their family, and they learn it when they're young, and that's how they pick up on the techniques. And a lot of them often do it in their own homes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
The
yeah, it's
the
really
original work
interesting.
from home routine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we're going to run out of time, so let's sell this book. Okay, the
Okay.
name of the book is The Art of Couture Embroidery. Uh, when's it available? How do we get a hold of it? Uh, do the pitch.
So we have our publishers telling us it's available early November, November the 5th. And as best as I can see, it's available everywhere. So your listeners should be able to just Google it and find it. In fact, both of us have our little names here,
Yes.
and I know that I've put a link on my website to where people can buy the book in the UK at Waterstones. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really great book because it's over 40 designers and really telling the story of them as people, where they get their ideas from, their lives, and then interpreting that in their embroidery on their most famous pieces. And obviously, Jess giving detailed instructions on how, if you want to, you can recreate this yourself.
Yeah, lots of fun projects in this book. It's because so many needlework books are project books. Like, here's 20 projects you can
Yeah.
do, and this, like I said earlier, this brings together that history and that picture of haute couture, and then here's how you can experience some of that embroidery. And immediately I started looking at, well, I'm not going to create a dress, but I could create a piece with some of this art using the technique, and have the fun of learning how it's done. And
Yeah.
it's yeah.
I think our hope was as well that if you are a maker or if you're just someone who loves fashion, you're served by this. As a
Yeah.
maker, you also get to think about the creative process. But then, as maybe a non-maker, you get to read the histories and then maybe learn a little bit more about why this is so special and difficult and hard. And Jess's chapter and instructions on the Chanel dress, where she's literally making sequins to
Yeah.
recreate the floral dress by Karl Lagerfeld, you realize when you flip back through the pages and go back to the picture of the dress, you go, oh God, now I understand why this is such an
Yeah.
expensive and difficult piece to make, because I've just looked through the instructions to do one tiny bit.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and this is a ginormous dress. So I think it should appeal to people at both ends of the spectrum. Basically, it should appeal to people like me,
Yep.
who love history of art, and it should appeal to people like Jess, who love technique.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the history that you put together sucked me in. I'm telling you, I had to stop. I had to stop because it's just so interesting how these people, their origins and their the things you offer about them. I just really enjoyed it. There's such a diversity. It's so much fun.
I felt like I was living with Christian Dior and Chanel at one point because I did those two chapters back to back, and they're both sort of crossing the same era in European history. And they lived through tough times. And I felt like after I wrote those two sections, I kind of had to go away and just take a moment and go, I'm going to write about Jean-Paul Gaultier instead. I need to be away from World War II right now.
Right. Yeah.
I think I was getting like text updates every time you were reading. You're like, oh my God, did you know? And I was like,
Yeah.
oh God, he's on it again.
It's true.
Yep.
It's true.
Yep. Well, and the other thing that stuck out this book is there is quite a movement of people embellishing regular clothing, going to thrift
Yeah.
shops and buying a shirt or pants and then embellishing. And I started looking at some of those things as a way to do that. You know, here's that started giving me some ideas for people who would
Yeah.
want to embellish just regular clothes that they wear every day. And there's so much that the book has to offer. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So the Art of Couture embroidery, and available in November, and from all the usual book things. So congratulations to you guys. You really put together a unique one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to read it and talk to us today.
Yep. Well, thanks for doing this, and thanks to everyone for listening.